Good evening, my fellow Chicagoans.
You have an idea?
I do.
She does.
Can somebody make sure it's on? I can't. Oh wait. Okay. I think it's on now. Yep. Yes. 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 Wasn't on. My bad. Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman here in our Northwest Side studio.
And I'm Paris Schutz in Lincoln Park right now as protesters head north toward Wrigley Field.
On the show tonight, aldermen react to a weekend of unrest, the impact of that unrest on COVID-19 testing, and Laquan McDonald's great uncle on what progress could come from the past and current protests.
But first, Brandis, as we mentioned, I'm co-anchoring tonight as protesters make their way through Lincoln Park and up toward Wrigley Field. It's been a peaceful protest. We'll have the latest on this and some tense situations in some South Side neighborhoods. But first, back to you with the latest updates from today.
Paris, we'll see you soon. But first tonight, just a half hour ago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot gave what her office called a State of the City address to Chicago's residents from her ceremonial office. They said that the speech was an effort to, quote, contextualize events that have happened in recent days. Here now in its entirety is that speech.
Good evening, my fellow Chicagoans. Tonight I want to discuss the events that unfolded across our city over these past few days. The steps that our great, resilient, and strong city will be taking to recover and to heal in the weeks and months ahead. And the hope I feel about the future, despite this difficult moment. Over the last few days, like many of you, I've experienced a series of difficult emotions: anger, frustration, despair, intense physical and emotional fatigue, and yes, also hope. Let me first address the heartbreak that many of us are experiencing. I've watched all of the video coverage of George Floyd's encounter with the 4 shameful Minneapolis police officers who took his life. I say all 4, and not just the one who had his knee on his neck. All 4 were complicit. None followed their training, none intervened, and all felt entitled to abuse the privilege and honor of their badge, to rob Mr. Floyd of his humanity, his future, and his life. None shied away from the brazenness of their conduct, even as Mr. Floyd cried out for his life. Thank goodness for the bystanders who stopped, trained their cameras on this obvious injustice, and preserved that moment for the rest of us to bear witness. The collective trauma and outrage arising from George Floyd's murder have reverberated in our city and across our country. For Black Americans, our history is paved with the racism and violence of the original sin of slavery. The open wounds from the slave master's whips, the rope marks from the lynching tree, blood spilled by the billy club, the dogs, and the fire hoses. To all of that, we must now add a knee to the neck, to the list of violence intended to break us. Here in Chicago, the murder of George Floyd evoked a long history of violence against African Americans in this country. More specifically, here in Chicago, it is indeed about Laquan McDonald and Quintonia LeGrier and Rekia Boyd and John Burge. And if we're honest, it goes back to at least as far as the Red Summer in 1919 and many other events before and since. It's about a fear that I must confess I still feel when I think about how the world will see my young black daughter. It is for that very reason that I stand with those who are sick and tired of a lack of fundamental change. Change that results in the respect, dignity, and freedom that black people deserve and demand in this country. To the thousands of people here in Chicago and across the country who engaged in peaceful, nonviolent protests for change, I stand with you. To those who have come out to express our shared righteous indignation in ways that give honor to Mr. Floyd and are consistent with the life and legacy of Mahatma Gandhi, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and so many others who believe in the power of nonviolent social change, I stand with you. However, I must draw a sharp line between the righteous and the wrong, between the hopeful and the cynical. We cannot conflate legitimate First Amendment expression with criminal conduct. Those acts are separate and distinct. We support and uplift what's right, and we must strongly condemn what's wrong. I will never stand for letting our pain spill over into violence and destruction against our communities. I will never stand for stealing the dreams and livelihoods of our neighbors. I will never stand for abandoning our values and our love of this city. My heart is truly broken over what has happened here in the city that I love. I have seen firsthand the piles of shattered glass and empty shelves. I do not mourn for that glass or for those shelves. I mourn for the son in Hyde Park who's piecing back together the 50-year-old store that his parents built in the face of racism from Jim Crow. I mourn for the daughter whose father dreamed of a family-owned shoe store that has supported his family for the past 50 years turn into a nightmare overnight. And I mourn for our young people who are clearly hurting, who don't see a future, for whom the light of hope in their eyes is dimming and in danger of being extinguished forever. My resolve is certain and clear. We will not leave our neighbors behind. As a city, I charge us to stop at nothing to ensure that the businesses we have lost come back to serve and support your neighbors, that the dreams of our young people are not lost, and that our path toward a more fair and just world remains within our reach. But I don't forget about the other part of my heart that is broken. It is broken over a different form of violence, a form that is always with us, a form that produces the despair and destruction and desperation that boils up in moments like these. It's what Bobby Kennedy called, quote, another kind of violence, slower but just as deadly, destructive as a shot or the bomb in the night, the violence of institutions, indifference and inaction, and slow decay. This is the violence that afflicts the poor, that poisons relations between men because their skin is different colors. This is the slow destruction of a child by hunger and schools without books and homes without heat in the winter. We see it throughout our city and manifests as a life expectancy gap that is exposed within a 15-minute drive between adjoining neighborhoods. As a city where 44% of all households don't earn enough to cover essentials like housing, childcare, food, transportation, and healthcare. We must recognize that this has deep roots in our history. These are the byproducts of a system of violence buried deep in our institution that must be rooted out. It calls us to look deep into our organizations, our decisions, and our hearts to reconcile and account for the sins and harms of those before us. Because if we do not, we bear the weight, we feel the pain, and we will continue to live with the destruction. I love this city deeply. It has been over 30 years since I first began my life here. This is a place that made me the woman I wanted to be, just as it has for millions of others today and throughout our history. I am a Chicagoan, and so are you. And as a Chicagoan, I'm a fighter. I don't back down from a challenge, and I protect what I love. Folks, this is our challenge. We know what we must do. We have always known. Full justice, true justice, equity and inclusion amongst all human beings is the only solution. And I am hopeful because what I also have seen from many of our fellow Chicagoans over the past few days through their resilience, hope in moments of despair, and dedication and commitment to our city. And here I must thank thousands of our own city workers, including police and fire, transit, sanitation, and so many others, along with millions of others who have fought to keep us afloat during these trying times. There is no shortcut to get to our better place. It is not one thing, it is not one program, it is not one event, it is not one person. It is everything, and it will require all of us. The opposite of violence is not security. The opposite of violence is justice. Justice is not something we can only look to find in law enforcement or in courts. Justice makes a demand of all of us, every part of our city. So tonight, my sadness, my anger, my frustration, they are met with my righteous hope. Hope that we own this moment. There are things that are difficult, but we know what we must do. It is our role as elected officials to roll up our sleeves and work in service of our communities, regardless of whether we created the problem or not. On May 10th, 2018, over 2 years ago, when I presented myself to you, the residents and the voters of Chicago, as a candidate for mayor, I spoke then, and I remain committed now, to equity and inclusion. I called them our North Stars. That commitment is even more crucial today because what we have experienced these last 10 weeks, and especially these last few days. Now, I'm not here tonight just to share reflections, some flowery prose, without concrete solutions. That would be a meaningless or cynical gesture. I am here again to talk about specific solutions. And here's where I think we start. Regarding police reform and accountability, yes, we are under a consent decree, but the process of reform has been too slow and too narrowly focused. I will share with you now the directives that I have given to Superintendent David Brown for some immediate necessary steps on our journey toward reform. It means implementing the police accountability reform measures that we laid out when I led the Police Accountability Task Force, ones that build bridges between police and community. And I will be working with the superintendent and department leadership to implement a number of these measures within the next 90 days. One's critical to helping resolve our crisis of faith between the communities and the police. These include better and different training for police officers, which brings the community into the academy as teachers. This means training for district law enforcement on the history of neighborhoods, taught from the perspective of community members. Expanding on programs like M3, My Block, My Hood, My City, that provide youth-led tours of neighborhoods so that officers understand the history of the people they are required and sworn to serve and protect. Implementing a real officer wellness program and completing the officer support system, early intervention pilot that provides support for officers in crisis, improving peer support, and providing counselors to those in need and holding people accountable. Because we all know that hurt people hurt people. Our officers must have better tools to manage the trauma and stress they see every day. This means mandating crisis intervention and procedural justice training for all officers, providing real tools for officers and community members to de-escalate challenging situations, establishing a new recruit program on police-community relations and community policing with views from the community about what works. 90 days. Let's get it done. And the superintendent and the department will be totally transparent in these efforts. This is just a start, not the end of our journey for police reform and accountability. Now, on top of these crucial reform measures, we need additional concrete solutions to help our neighbors and businesses recover. That means a fund for small businesses that have been hit recently, but have always been neglected. So we will continue working to support a $10 million grant fund for these businesses. We will immediately set up this new fund for businesses that have been hit hard but have been neglected. We will start with $10 million in city funds and invite others from the private sector and philanthropy to join us in this work. The funds will be provided citywide with an equity weighting that focuses on the south and the west sides and businesses that have been most affected over the last few days. It also means that I will use every tool at my disposal to push insurance companies to do the right thing by their business customers. We are continuing to push and will soon have an announcement on insurance support for businesses. Now is the time to cut through red tape. Stop hiding behind small print. Get your adjusters out in the neighborhoods and start cutting checks. And it means comprehensive investment in mental health resources and healthcare. Just days ago, as I recently announced, this includes $1.2 million in funding at the community-based level to expand access for our residents experiencing serious mental illness and investment in a telemedicine platform to increase access and a website dedicated to wellness and self-care open to all Chicagoans. These resources are available for free. Please take advantage of them. I also want to speak to our young people in this moment. I want you to know that we see and hear you. I know that you are concerned and hurt and angry and traumatized as well as we all are. But my ask of you is this: be the example for us adults in the way that you are with each other. Be examples in the way that you process the hurt and the fear that you're experiencing. Be leaders for us and stand up and lift up your voices. And for us adults, I say this all the time, and it bears repeating now. Our children are watching. And my hope is that they see us standing up in this moment and standing tall, because we need to be them for them now more than ever. Even in this difficult and scary time, we need to wrap our arms around them with love and support. So folks, we will clean up these broken windows, but we can't stop there. We must also repair and clean up our broken systems, not just by ending the violence that we've seen here, but reimagining our city and what our city means and must mean for every neighborhood and every community and every individual. Because as we repair this damage, as we mend these broken windows, and we clean our streets, we also have an opportunity to ensure that we do the same for those wounds that are not immediately visible, for the harm that has been done over many generations, and for the cracks in our society that we've ignored for far too long. We can do this, and we will do this. This is a start, not an end. Much more needs to be done. But I am committed, and I hope you will be with me on this necessary journey of our lifetime. That is a dream that we must fulfill. That is a task now in our hands. If we work, we can do what James Baldwin described. We will have, quote, in the teeth of the most terrifying odds, achieved an unassailable and monumental dignity. My brothers and sisters, even in the midst of our broken hearts for our brother George, who was ruthlessly taken away, and so many here in our city, before and after, the names that we all know well, we need to remember and cherish our great strength. That is, of course, our diversity. 77 neighborhoods strong, each unique and beautiful. 140 plus languages spoken, but we all speak in unison. We hail from different backgrounds, we worship different gods, but we are all united as Chicagoans. We cannot fail. We will not fail. We will not be distracted by those who are not pure of heart and mind. They are not us, and we are not them. We will and we must be united around a singular vision that we rise and fall together. If there is to be an uprising, let it be for peace. I call on all people of goodwill, young, old, black, brown, white, Asian, from all faith traditions, to rise up with me for peace. Stand for peace. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless this great city of Chicago.
That was Mayor Lori Lightfoot speaking just under an hour ago from her ceremonial office at City Hall. Now, with reaction to that speech and more, here is Phil Ponce and members of Chicago's City Council. Phil.
Thanks, Brandis. And those aldermen joining us are Alderman Gilbert Villegas, who represents the Northwest Side's 36th Ward and is Mayor Lightfoot's City Council floor leader. Alderman Raymond Lopez, who represents the 15th Ward, which includes West Englewood, Gage Park, Brighton Park, and back of the yards. And Michelle Smith, who represents the 43rd Ward, encompassing Lincoln Park, the Gold Coast, and Old Town. And Alderman Anthony Beal, who represents the 9th Ward on the far south side, who recently called for 3,000 National Guardsmen to be deployed in the city. And thank you all for joining us. We just heard what she described as a state of the city address, given what is going on in the city. And Alderman Lopez, you are one of the mayor's biggest critics. A quick reaction to her speech.
You know, this speech was filled with a lot of the same platitudes and catchphrases that we've heard for the last year, but now is not the time for those things. We need real solutions. We need to address where our faults have been so that we don't keep making the same mistakes that have put the lives of thousands of people in our neighborhoods at risk. We need to address the safety of our neighborhoods and do it now, and we did not get that tonight.
Alderman Villegas, your reaction to the mayor's speech?
Well, I think that she's taking a look at putting together a plan to begin to address these issues of inequity. What you've seen is decades of disinvestment in the south and west sides of the city, and one of the top programs that we passed at the city council is the Invest Southwest, which will bring $750 million worth of investments to the south and west sides of the city, which is much needed. You know, this is decades of disinvestment. I saw recently on the west side regarding the 68 riots, and there's buildings that have still not been developed. I mean, that's a shame. And so with this administration is going to focus on through the Invest Southwest, investing on the south side and the west side.
Alderman Beal, you also are one of the mayor's critics. Your reaction to what she had to say?
Well, what I see is, damage control from the past 2 weeks. We had a horrible Memorial Day weekend with a record number of murders, and then this past weekend with the riots and the record number of murders. And I think what you're seeing are the wheels are basically coming off of the wagon. And so, we're looking to do damage control because there was no plan in place whatsoever as far as the reaction to the looters and the protesters this past weekend. Once they looted downtown and protested downtown and they came into the communities, there was no plan in place. We didn't cancel police vacation and give overtime until Saturday night at 11 o'clock is when that email went out. And so National Guard should have been deployed Friday. They should have been in the city Friday, and not just downtown. We can't just continue to protect downtown. We need protection in the community as well. And they're trying to spin it as though we want the National Guards to patrol the communities. Nobody is asking for the National Guard to patrol the communities. We're asking for the National Guards to do the same thing in our community that they're doing downtown, and it's just give us a protected barrier to give the police relief to do what they need to do to help our communities. Our communities were left high and dry, and there was no plan in place this past weekend.
Michelle Smith, not enough planning went into what the city has been facing?
Let me just say that I think that a speech that is about hope and direction are not platitudes. I think that it's a speech to give us a direction to our city. This has gone on in our city, this disinvestment and poverty has gone on way too long. And the Black lives that are being lost in our city all these years matter very much. I believe in supporting law enforcement, but I also believe that the first people who have to follow the law are the police themselves. So I really hope that this does give us an opportunity to pull together as a city and to pull together on several grounds. One, to support our police in getting better, because better training brings justice. And also to finally fix the uneven opportunities in our city over all these years. I also think that we do have to bring to justice the people who so cynically and painfully have inflicted pain on our own communities, and work to get more private resources to those communities.
Alderman Beal, the mayor has said that the violence spread like wildfire, and even if the Chicago Police Department had 3 or 4 times the manpower, that it would not, even that greater number would not have been enough to respond to all the 911 calls. Does she have a point?
Well, yes, I agree with that because it did spread like wildfire. However, I was on the front line and I helped save the one Walmart on the south side of Chicago because I went out there at 8 o'clock in the morning, worked with my police commander, worked with the manager of Walmart, called Sheriff Tom Dart, and I got extra resources from them in order to save my Walmart. And so I've been trying to get additional resources so we can reopen that Walmart because right now there's no pharmacy on the south side of Chicago. Where are people getting their prescription drugs? I have the only pharmacy that was not hit. We have to protect that. I have the only grocery store that was not hit because we protected it. So how do we protect it to give people someplace to go right now to get diapers, to get milk, to get their prescription drugs, to get the bare necessities, because we know the looters are waiting to get that particular store. So where's my help as far as trying to make sure that store is protected? I'm asking for the National Guards to come out and give me a barrier around my Walmart to help with the police, to help protect that store, and I have got nothing in support.
Alderman Villegas, there have been concerns that the looting has not been random and spontaneous, but highly organized. What are you being told by law enforcement officials about that?
Yes. So when we take a look at the calls on Sunday, typically you might get 15,000 calls. They had north of 65,000 calls. And so this was a very coordinated effort by some of the looters. What we saw is you saw U-Hauls backing up into places that had items that they can sell real quick. And so Again, it was very coordinated. The system was overwhelmed. No one was prepared to have 65,000 calls of 911. And it was a very coordinated effort of people taking advantage of a situation where protesters are protesting the murder of Mr. Floyd, and then you had opportunists that were looking to take advantage of a situation where they wanted to take goods, and it was just a very coordinated effort.
Alderman Lopez, there are reports that in some areas, some people suspected of being looters were being violently targeted, and that this violence was breaking along racial lines. What was the experience in your ward?
Well, let me just say, first off, Phil, that's 100% correct. And that has been fueled in part by the bad decisions that a number of my colleagues, like Alderman Mike Rodriguez and Byron Cicho Lopez, in coordination with the Lightfoot administration, pursued in order to use gang members to secure neighborhoods. They made a conscientious decision when the police were unable to hold and maintain control of the community to partner with gang members who, despite warnings by me during our briefings, said that this was a bad idea because gang members will only resort to the only identifiers that they know, which is skin color. I was dismissed. It has been reported how I was talked to, and look at where we're at now. We are on the verge of racial tensions like we haven't seen in decades because of what has gone on, because of the
specifically. Give me an example of what you're talking about. For instance,
there are videos on Facebook, on Instagram, where you have Latino gangbangers on 26th Street, standing on 26th and Kedzie with baseball bats and barriers, yelling in English and Spanish how they're going to keep African Americans, anyone who's Black, from coming into their community. You have seen that repeated time and again, and I begged the mayor to do something about it. This morning, I had an incident where a juvenile gang member shot a 49-year-old Black resident of my ward because he was in the neighborhood. He lived in the neighborhood. He was shot less than a block from his house. It took her 5 hours to respond, and even then, it was silence. I know the fear that my community has. I represent African Americans and Latinos. We are all under one roof, and I will not sit by while people make light of the platitudes that are being thrown out there now, while people in my neighborhood of every color are in fear because of what's been stoked to this point. It is completely unacceptable. I support Alderman Beal, as do my residents of every demographic, to have National Guard, to provide presence, to give police the ability to catch up.
Alderman
is involved now because I can't count on this administration to defend my residents the way she should every other neighborhood that she's put National Guard around.
We're almost out of time. Alderman Michelle Smith, is it time for more National Guard's troops to come into the city to assist Chicago police?
I don't think so. I think that it would be a decision that sounds very attractive right now, and I think it was one that we would regret if we deployed it. I grew up in an era when National Guard were deployed and shot innocent people, and I'm not blaming them, but they do not have the training in the necessarily use of restraint that our police are showing. And that's been shown in so many cities.
Are we supporting the ones downtown?
I think it is just too dangerous. And
parts of your ward are already
I think it's too dangerous.
That's insane. Parts of your ward are already protected by that.
No. The National Guard, no,
parts
they
of
aren't.
River North are protected. Downtown are protected. West Loop are protected.
An important discussion, to be sure. I sincerely regret that we are out of time. Alderman Villegas, Alderman Lopez, Alderman Smith, and Alderman Beal, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
And up next, pair of shots and details on a march through the city's north side, as well as concerns over violence on the southwest side. But first, a look at the weather.
Another day of protests in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. But while a peaceful protest made its way across the north side, residents in many south and southwest side neighborhoods are on edge tonight. Residents in Pilsen reported heavy gunfire all through last night as gang members reportedly attempted to keep watch over the neighborhood. And residents are fearing what tonight might be like. We go to Paris Schutz, who's now with protesters in Lakeview. But first, Paris, you spent much of the day in Pilsen. Paris, can you hear me?
Hey, Brandis, we are marching with protesters here, headed toward Wrigleyville. We're in Lakeview right now. Wrigleyville is where this march started about 5 hours ago. As you can see there, cars lined up now. This protest has been peaceful for most of the day. It's been escorted by police. They made their way through Old Town South. There was a sit-in near Halsted and Division. Again, it was very peaceful. Various speakers spoke. There have been chants like "Say His Name" in reference to George Floyd, chants like "Black Lives Matter." And there are protests going on across the city, including on the south side at 26th and King Drive tonight. Now, earlier today, we were in Pilsen on the south side after residents experienced lots of gunfire over the night. Now, residents say Latino gang members had been keeping watch there against looters, but aldermen and some other residents we spoke with say it went beyond that. Now, they say the gang members were actively targeting African Americans that they saw in the neighborhood and harassing them or even shooting. Now, we're hearing these stories all across the south and southwest side, places like Little Village and suburban Cicero, which is on lockdown right now. Few people can even get in and out. Now, Pilsen Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez says he fears tonight could be even worse.
What I experienced last night, I've never seen before. We've seen anti-black racism. That's what we saw last night. We saw residents being chased out of drivers being chased out of the community. We saw the distrust to levels that we have never experienced before. Of course, we have to reckon with the issues that we have at hand. The police brutality issues that we see issues of the lack of relief in general for city. There's no investment. We have historic issues here, segregation, lack of investment. And when you add up all of that and the distress that's being created when we're left out on our own.
Now, this morning, Lightfoot acknowledged the situation in Pilsen and said gang members cannot be patrolling shops and businesses there. That has to be up to the police department.
These are young men that grew up in the neighborhood. They are known. And what we don't need is for them to be out. And I heard from one alderman with a bunch of young men sitting and drinking all day and then pulling out their weapons at night. We don't need that. We're not going to tolerate that. The police are the public safety force in our city, not gang members.
Now, there are social media posts on all sides of these issues. A lot of folks imploring people not to be divided, to stay united, African American and Latino, to fight for justice right now. Some residents played down any racial tensions. They said they're just trying to help businesses stave off any looters, regardless of skin color.
For me and for the neighbors on this block, this isn't necessarily anything about race. This was about protecting our neighborhood. Everyone that I helped was different ethnicity. It wasn't predominantly helping Latinos, predominantly helping black people. It was just making sure the block was okay, making sure that 18th Street was safe overnight.
Meanwhile, volunteer groups were putting food and supplies together for needy families, but also providing plywood and other supplies to protect businesses. The groups, led by a group called Healthyhood Chicago, says they're venturing all over the South Side to assist and also play down any racial tensions.
We have a lot of volunteers that are going to help clean up black and brown owned businesses in our community, not just in Pilsen, but all over the city. A lot of the narrative is saying that black and brown communities are in conflict. What we're trying to say is that's not really the case. That's just kind of being magnified through the media. We're trying to show that we are in unity here and we are initiating all of these services.
And again, some tense moments in Pilsen. Today we're back here on the north side. Still some protesters myself walking north toward Wrigley Field. That's presumably where this protest is going in. It's where it started at 2 p.m. And Brandis, we will check back in with you before the end of the show.
Okay, Paris, thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Be safe. The unrest in Chicago and the suburbs may have overshadowed it in recent days, but we are still in the midst of a global health pandemic. What are the potential impacts of the protests on the coronavirus? Amanda Vinicky has been reporting on that today, and she joins us live from Rush University Medical Center in the near West Side's Illinois Medical District. Amanda.
Yes, Brandis, all of Illinois was ordered actually in mid-March to stay home unless absolutely necessary. And some folks did not choose to abide, others couldn't. They had to go to work. But by and large, officials say that people did stay home. Chicago and the rest of the state were in fact beginning to ease COVID-19 related restrictions. But then came the killing of George Floyd, which sparked outrage, and people, masses of them, left their homes and literally spilled onto the streets. Chicago's public health director says she is concerned that this could cause a retreat in the battle against the coronavirus.
In a city that still has a lot of COVID-19, our risk is simply higher, and the chance that a gathering will have someone in it who has COVID-19 but doesn't even know it, because of course one of the most insidious things about this virus is it has the potential to spread even among people who do not have symptoms. That risk is present and it is higher.
Protests can be especially unforgiving. People are crowded together, they're shouting, and so in those instances, projecting air droplets. Dr. Chris Colbert oversees University of Illinois Chicago's emergency medicine residency program and says that for any protester, there are recommendations to follow.
Wearing a mask, maintaining at least 3 feet of space within any sort of demonstration, which is somewhat of a challenge, I understand. Now, coupled with that, maintaining hand sanitizer as well would be very good. And always our suggestion is, if you feel not well, if you feel sick, please do not demonstrate. Find alternative methods to communicate your message.
Key to the strategy of tempering the coronavirus caseload has been testing for it, but with civil unrest and general mayhem, that too has been scaled back. The state for the past few days has shuttered its 10 coronavirus testing sites, so there still may be some privately run sites that are doing testing. The Illinois Department of Public Health did not directly answer a question about what impact that reduction in testing could have on monitoring COVID-19 spread, but in a statement, IDPH says it does hope to be able to open community sites because that is, quote, essential to reopening Illinois. Now, Dr. Maya Green is regional director for Howard Brown Health, and she says she does expect to see a spike in COVID-19 cases because of the protests. But she says participation in these demonstrations is an expression of trauma. It is not a frivolous decision.
So this is centuries of built up frustration, centuries of being underserved, centuries of having expression that is evaluated by other cultures, and that evaluation comes out as a judgment. And so these people did not make the choice, right? This choice, what's happening right now, is a result of what happened with George Floyd.
Green says that it is significant, it is notable that the same Black and brown communities that are experiencing higher numbers of COVID-19 cases and deaths are now on the forefront of having to deal with connected racial equity problems. Green says that just like we cannot win COVID-19 in silos, the same holds true with racial equity. Brandis, back to you.
Amanda, thank you. Up next, we check back in with Paris Schutz, who's following a protest marching on the city's north side.
Don't ever miss Chicago Tonight. Subscribe to our podcast. Get a daily download of our show delivered to your desktop or mobile device. Go to WTTW.com/Chicago Tonight podcast and subscribe.
Checking back in now with Paris Schutz, who's following a march on the city's north side, a large protest on the move there. Paris.
Yeah, Brandis, we are here in Wrigleyville. We've made it almost all the way back to where this march began at 2 p.m. at Wrigley Field. It's dispersed. There have been several thousand marchers here. It has been peaceful for most of this afternoon, a very scorching hot afternoon, but tensions have remained pretty calm. But on the south side in Pilsen, there are tensions rising right now. We're going to show you a little bit more of our interview with 25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez about what he experienced in that neighborhood last night.
We've seen the tensions brewing for a while. My staff and I were going around in the community just to have a better sense of what's going on. We see the tensions high. We see how residents across the city, across the country, have now waited 3 months to get any kind of relief. We have people being inside, without income for a long time, afraid of losing their homes, foreclosure, you name it. People who are sick, especially in communities of color. What I experienced last night, I've never seen before. We've seen anti-black racism. That's what we saw last night. We saw residents being chased out of drivers being chased out of the community. We saw the distrust to levels that we have never experienced before. Of course, we have to reckon with the issues that we have at hand. The police brutality issues that we see issues of the lack of relief in general for city. There's no investment. We have historic issues here, segregation, lack of investment. And when you add up all of that and the distress that's being created when we are left out on our own, I'm not the only alderman experiencing this. Alderman Irving, Alderman Brookings, when we see the communities left on their own and no political clarity, no clarity what's the situation. We see the distress and the biggest concern is this anti-black racism that we start to see like we've never seen before.
Okay, so what folks are saying to me is that they're just guarding their businesses, and people who are coming in to loot, they're trying to chase them out. Is that not the total story?
That's not a total story. Let me tell you a story. Not to say that there has not been, there was at least an instance here in the community where there was a business that was looted. We spoke with a small business owner. We know what we can do in our community to address these issues. The business owners called me at 3:30 in the morning, and the business owner told me, the homeowner told me, these are young kids. These are 14, 15-year-olds. They have 14, 15-year-olds. The police want to press charges. The business owner, after we spoke, he said, this is just not right. This is not right. The business owner decided to not press charges, let them go, and commit to a restorative justice process. Now, our communities are being pitched against each other. There's a much, much larger structure, and the system is falling apart. Is a system that is rotten to the core. And when we are not have a strategy and a plan, and I will say that Mayor Lightfoot has the responsibility to make sure that our communities are protected, and the kind of policing that we have, the type of police that is not on our side, the type of police that is not accountable. The very reason why we have the protests is because of a lack of police accountability.
So do you not have police in this neighborhood? Did you not have it last night guarding and trying to keep peace?
Well, when we heard from some residents, and this is directly from a resident, that said that the police, and when a lot of the residents have access to the radio and they know what's going on, some of the residents said that they saw a lot of police over there in the 12th district by a peaceful protest and very little around here. So we're left on our own without resources. But again, the issue of policing is at the core of this. We need to make sure that we discuss as a priority, as a council, police accountability, and a bill that goes long to make sure that we are talking about these issues. The issue that we have right now at hand, the anti-black racism that we see, is the result of decades of oppression, and this time is a time that we have the neglect has pitched communities against each other.
'25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez there in Pilsen, hoping for a peaceful night tonight, more peaceful than last night. A lot of concerns across Southwest Side here. They're back at Wrigley Field where they started at 2 o'clock. It's been a peaceful protest. One of the interesting things about this protest, there have been people every step of the way handing out water and snacks and hand sanitizer. And as you see, folks kneeling down right now, folks speaking. And Brandis, we're going to check back in here right before the end of the show, but now we will throw it right back to you.
Okay, Paris, thank you. And now we're going to check back in with Amanda Vinicky. She's got more for us from Rush University Medical Center, located in the Illinois Medical District on the city's near west side. Amanda.
Brandis, I'm joined by the Vice President for Community Health Equity for Rush University Medical Center. That's Darlene Hightower. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Obviously, Rush has a position dedicated to community health equity. So for starters, just what is your general reaction to all that has gone on? We're seeing both the coinciding of a pandemic that is particularly hitting people of color, and at the same time, all of this unrest.
You're absolutely right. It's the perfect storm of a pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen in over 100 years, the economic fallout from that pandemic, and then you have the tragic death of George Floyd. So all of these things kind of coming together have caused a perfect storm of challenge across the country.
So what are you planning to do in your role at Rush to try and intervene there? I know you have some programs going on.
You know, we have. So before the incident with Mr. Floyd happened, we had a number of things going on, from working with the city with the racial equity rapid response team, to other programs to address homelessness and COVID-19, to reaching out to seniors who might be experiencing social isolation because of this pandemic. So a lot of different programs have been happening at Rush.
Programs including one that has the support of none other than Oprah Winfrey.
I know, Chicago's own, right?
What is that? She's given some money to donate to a cause. What do you plan to do with it?
She has, and so she's donating to Live Healthy Chicago, which brings together 5 what I call core partners, and then we'll bring together also community-based organizations on the west and south sides to do a couple of things. One, to provide PPE or personal protective equipment, to do food supply giveaways, to do training for CHWs that can get out, community health workers, and provide support services for COVID-19, and also the food services as well. There's one thing I forgot, but it'll come to me.
Outreach to seniors is another program. So how do you do that at a time where these are a vulnerable population to COVID-19, and yet you need to do outreach, make sure that they're okay, that they have supplies, food?
Yeah, we do, and it's critically important. So we have a lot of seniors across the city that don't have access to food, don't have someone that's there to kind of help them get through this pandemic. So those calls can really be a lifeline. We have a friendly caller program where we have volunteers and others that are connecting to seniors, and then also providing support services. We have a relationship or partnership with Top Box, providing food delivery to seniors and others.
Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, many of the people that we have seen taking part in demonstrations are youth. What are you doing? And we'll get to the COVID-19 aspect of this. I know you have a certification program, but in general, how are you communicating the importance of, okay, go out there, make your voice heard, exercise your First Amendment rights, something that is important, and yet there are some very true health concerns?
There are, but you know, like, this is the time where people should have their voices heard, but do it in a way that's still socially distant, that's still wearing masks, that's still using hand sanitizers for their hands. I think we should encourage young people to be out and protest, raise their voices, and, you know, share how they're feeling in this moment.
Well, because health is also, I mean, we see it as coming to the hospital. We're here at Rush, but part of your work is that there are so many other aspects of health, and that's something that Rush has been looking into for some years now.
Yeah.
How do you explain that connection to people that say, I get a physical, I go to the hospital if I have an emergency?
Sure, we call that the social factors around health. There are so many things that affect your health outcome that are outside of your doctor's visits. It's where you live. Do you have access to healthy food? Do you have a job? Are you educated? Like, all the things that we know lend to a healthy, vibrant life.
What role does a hospital have in that?
I think if you're really interested in health and healing and the overall well-being of the people that you serve, you care about the social factors that impact that well-being.
And then finally, again, I wanted to hit on this certificate program.
Yes, we are really excited about this. We are going to be working with young people to be community health workers, so they will get certified by Rush so that they can do those senior outreach calls and provide social support services to elderly people.
Thank you so very much to Darlene Hightower, the VP of Community Health Equity here at Rush University Medical Center. Brandis, back to you.
Amanda, thank you. And now we check back in with Paris, who's at the large march protest on Chicago's north side. Paris, it looks like they are standing back up. What's going on right now?
Yeah, Brandis, we're back here at Wrigley Field where this march started almost 6 hours ago and is presumably ending right now. Folks engaged in a kneel down for a little bit, and they were talking they were chanting Black Lives Matter, hands up, don't shoot, saying things like that. It's been a peaceful protest so far. Some tensions have flared up, but really nothing serious that we've heard of. As you can see, folks have just gotten up. They're uttering some other chants right now. It's indicative of what's happening across the city right now. There are marches and protests happening across the south side, here in Wrigleyville, in the north side. Interesting that it ends up here in Wrigleyville. The Ricketts and the Cubs put out a statement today condemning what happened to George Floyd, vowing to end racism. That was a controversial statement to some people because of some of the Ricketts' political ties. As you hear the crowd cheering here now. This crowd has thinned out a little bit. It has been in the thousands at certain points through the day. It started here, it marched down to Old Town, it went west on Division, where there was a kneel down near Larrabee and Division, and then it marched all the way back up here where it began. So again, everybody here hoping for a peaceful night, a peaceful rest of the weekend, peaceful like this protest has been. And Brandis, we go back to you now.
Yeah, it's a long night, Paris. Thank you. I'm sure a long walk, long day, actually, long march. Okay, that is our show for this Tuesday night. We ran out of time for our conversation with Reverend Marvin Hunter, which we mentioned earlier. He is, of course, Laquan McDonald's great uncle. We hope to have him on the show again soon. Don't forget to stay connected with us, though, by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app, and please join us tomorrow night live at 7.
Right, the city's top public health official on mitigating the spread of COVID-19 amid the reopening, plus the latest on the protests and the city and state's response to them. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Please stay safe, and we will see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm whose pro bono work kept open a church shelter for the homeless in Chicago's southern suburbs.